with the oil leaks was in essence that the materials that were being used, in use for liquid-cooled engines, were simply not up to the job. They're all organic materials. And the higher temperatures, the higher running temperatures in the Corvair, both in air and oil, are simply on average higher than they are in a liquid-cooled engine. Actually, though, in peak temperatures, which is another deal, we had some peak temperatures, oil temperatures, on the Line 6 water-cooled that were higher than we ever saw in the Corvair. But it didn't live a long time at that. If I remember my chemistry right, the progression of an organic or a chemical reaction doubles for every 10 degrees centigrade increase in temperature. So the deterioration of organic materials is a time-temperature function. The bottom line to this is that in order to solve the leak problems, gaskets anyway, we had to find some new materials. Same to you, fellow. The gasket vendors were only too happy to cooperate. Say we got trouble with an oil pan gasket, well, they'd go back to the plant and they'd take a sheet of everything they had in stock, everything in sight, and put them through the cutters. And they'd come in with a box full of samples and say, here, how in the hell are we going to sort this kind of stuff out? And of course, the problem was that we really had to come up with some new materials, particularly the rocker cover. That's its own story. One of the first things that came out of this, when I finally had a guy full-time on oil leaks, was to put that reinforcement under the screws. And the thing we found was, we knew how much torque belonged on those screws. They were quarter 20, as I remember. But there were too many ham-handed mechanics that all wanted to make them go tight. They ground down on these things to the point where the gasket was all but split out of the area, and the rocker cover had a big hole where the screw was. Well, this reinforcement it went a long way to fixing that, and the rest of it was with gaskets. O-rings. I always often get the question, what's the matter with you dumb people? Why didn't you put Viton in there? Everybody knows Viton's better than that crap you were using. We weren't really quite that stupid. When the Challenger went up in smoke, maybe you'll remember, the problem with the Challenger was a high-temperature rubber elastomer, high-temperature synthetic elastomer that went to pot in freezing temperature. And that, of course, was our reluctance to use Viton, high temperature. Well, it did fine. But get it in Canada, cold weather, cold starts, 20 below, 30 below, Viton gets rock hard. And there wasn't really a way we could say to the dealer or even to the buyer, say, hey, you can take this car to Canada. If you're not going to Canada, we'll give you Viton O-rings. Mostly what we found, O-rings are extremely sensitive to nicks, scratches, small digs in the surfaces. And, I get called into dealerships, locals, we got one for you, come and see this. And what we usually found was that somebody had been in the grooves on the tube to get in there with a screwdriver. And it takes about 3 pries to get the thing out, which means there are 3 nicks. in the lip of that groove. The O-ring then it's put in to replace that. Doesn't have a chance. It goes in over these burrs, and if there's 3 burrs on the rim, putting it in, there's 3 nicks in the O-ring and 3 leaks. I guess I can't emphasize that too much. That, well, I guess I already have. Have to be extremely careful with both the receiving groove for the O-ring as well as the receiving hole. That there isn't the least suggestion of a nick, scratch, something that's going to leave a track on the O-ring. And also that it be properly lubricated on the way in. If it's not lubricated, it tends to roll over in the groove. And if it rolls in the groove, all bets are off. You got a leaker right then and there. Enough on that. I see. Let's try it. Cooling problems. Most of the cooling problem was a problem with our own manufacturing. And we're forever wanting relief from this specification. Can't you give us a little more room here to the plates that form the fins on the head? Did they really have to match that close? Or can they? And it was a constant scrap. Remember the very early models had a full fin on the cylinders all the way around with a hole going down for the stud. This hole was a piece of, fairly fragile dry sand that went into the mold and made that hole. So we scrapped about that from day one. We wanted that full round in order to keep the heat from distorting the bore. Keep the bore round by having uniform heat distribution. And quite a bit of test time went into, by the way, that shroud that attaches underneath the cylinders. It's got the bottom ones, cleaned off or closed off almost totally, and a tapered and then full open hole toward the top. And this is an effort to keep uniform as possible temperatures between the top and the bottom of the cylinder and around. Makes fundamental sense that the cylinder board ought to stay straight and round. But it was a constant scrap. We lost on the full round fins, and it wasn't very long into production when we had to swallow the notched ones as it is now. Otherwise, the cooling was fairly well in hand. The design was not changed a whole lot as a result of testing.
Had a wonderful sound. Corvair, right?
Oh, yes. That's hardly unique here, though, is it? I remember what you were talking about earlier. I was privileged to be the banquet speaker for the Bay Area, California, if you'll pardon the expression, Bay Area chapters of Corsa for an anniversary dinner and celebration of a 10th or 15th anniversary of the club, I forget which. And for that occasion, I had an extra copy of the original paper on the Corvair, the original SAE paper. And I sent the thing first to Kai Hansen, who was one of the other authors on the paper, and asked him to sign it, and then sent it to Frank Winchell and asked Frank to sign it, and then I signed it. And I presented the thing at that occasion in the Bay Area. Dave Newell ended up with it, I'm pretty sure, and maybe he still has it. I hope it ends up in Ypsilanti, which is when that thing gets going, is where it belongs. But I know that's the only one in existence. I know I never signed another one, and if I didn't sign but one, that's the only one alive. At one time, that Corvair paper was the all-time biggest seller for SAE. It was of enough technical interest that it set those records. At the time of Seattle, I tried to find out from SAE headquarters whether that record still held or not, and they just said they didn't keep the records that long. Anyway, I've had some pretty good experiences with Corsa. Back to that one in the Bay Area. They asked people to submit questions for a Q&A session, and to submit them on 3x5 cards. And then whoever was in charge there would go through and take out the duplicates and so on. And of course, there were a whole bunch of them. How do I get my turbocharger to run on unleaded regular? What do I have to do? And the only thing I could say, I can't offer much. The only thing I can offer or recommend is prayer. Of course, all kinds of questions on oil leaks. Those were the repeaters. The one that I remembered, and I forgot to bring it along. There was a question. What is the cure for Corvair fever? And it was signed a frustrated wife. I guess at this point, I'm starting to run down or run out of stories. I don't know whether to take questions or not. The problem is, you guys will all ask me, what do I have to do to make my turbocharger run on unleaded regular? If you know, let's go back here. It's been 45 years. I've got one without, and my memory isn't. Well, it ain't good for 45 years. So when we get down to technical questions, you guys are in better shape. You're up to date on that sort of thing, where it's long out of memory for me. So if you'll promise, no technical questions. Don't ask me what the bearing clearance was on the thrust bearing on the mains.
You must vote for Unsafe in the CorvairForum.com contest for Corvair of the Month for March 2013.
Yes. Please cast your vote for Unsafe.
Vote for Unsafe or else.